I think, oftentimes in life and in business, you're put in a position where you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And you're kind of choosing between a lot of bad options. I actually think they've run the calculus and what they're betting on. And I'm with you, by the way. Like, there's some stuff that I bought that it's going to be more expensive, and I don't love that. But this is the calculation that I think that we're doing. And it should be said, by the way, this is not a politics show. Roland and I, we're not overly political people. I mean, I think we generally have our leanings, but both of us are kind of like, just, you're all crackheads. Just tell us the situation we're operating under, and we'll figure it out. I don't trust any of you knuckleheads.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Business Lunch with your hosts Ryan Deiss and myself, Roland Frasier. We are today kind of following up on something we talked a little bit about before, but in a different context. We talked about the fact that the United States, as of just a couple days ago, as we record this, has put into place tariffs, and there are more to come that are being framed as negative and a trade war. And my dog in the hunt is that I've got things overseas that I buy regularly. I've got things that are being repaired overseas that are going to come back that I'm going to be paying tariffs on now that I wouldn't have paid on before. I would prefer not to. And so I think, like, Ryan and I were talking back and forth as we often do, and saying this is probably less about tariffs and more about negotiation and leverage. And so we wanted to do a little show on that and talk about that a little bit. So Ryan, I'll kind of put it to you. What do you think? Like, do you think that the tariffs are being put in place as a new way to generate revenue, or to exclusively generate revenue, and that the idea is we're just going to put these in place and they're going to stay there? Or is there some other thing at work? Like, in the negotiation context, I would say, what do you think the end goal, the desired outcome of this whole thing is?
Yeah, I mean, I think, oftentimes in life and in business, you're put in a position where you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And you're kind of choosing between a lot of bad options. I actually think they've run the calculus and what they're betting on. And I'm with you, by the way. Like, there's some stuff that I bought that it's going to be more expensive, and I don't love that.
Yeah.
But this is the calculation that I think that we're doing. And it should be said, by the way, this is not a politics show. Roland and I, we're not overly political people. I mean, I think we generally have our leanings, but both of us are kind of like, just, you're all crackheads. Just tell us the situation we're operating under, and we'll figure it out. I don't trust any of you knuckleheads. Right. So I kind of just setting that aside. We don't have an agenda, on this. We're not backing any parties or candidates or anything.
But there are some learnings, I think, right?
Oh, heck yeah. And so I want to think about this from a business perspective.
Yes.
Because what they've done, and I think anytime you can do this in a negotiation, I sort of think that in the medium to long term, that America wins no matter what. So I think they've figured out that if the tariffs go into place, that it is going to generate some additional revenue. Now, it's going to generate some additional revenue at the expense of the consumer. But I think what they're betting is that whatever the additional expenses incurred by the consumer, that's likely going to be hedged against inflation coming down. So the consumers have already been paying more and have been used to paying more. And so if, as a part of this, frankly, sales go down a little bit, you get the economy shrink a little bit, then you have deflation, then what we have is prices going down at the same time that the cost of these things, because the additional taxes go up. I think they're betting that it's going to wind up evening out. But yeah, they're telling a whole story about all this new revenue that it's going to generate. I don't think that they believe that it's going to generate a ton of revenue, because I think that they believe that these businesses, that I think they believe two things. I think they believe that, number one, countries are going to match the tariffs. They're going to either come bring their tariffs down, or they're going to go, which some already have. And also that a lot of these businesses are simply going to move their operations to the States, which is going to be good for consumers. There's another piece of this, though, that nobody's really talking about, and that's that the U.S. government has to refinance like trillions of dollars in debt that it has to refinance, and it has to refinance it at essentially the Fed rate, right? That's kind of what it's refinancing it, and not exactly that. I'm speaking kind of broadly, but as these, as the economy's dipping, as it's bringing interest rates down, which means that when we have to go back and refinance all that debt, we're refinancing it at a lower rate. So if all they do, I think they win three ways. They win either because it generates some additional revenue. They win because countries bring their tariffs down because of a negotiating strategy, and or companies who are producing overseas produce here, which is good for the American worker. And then thirdly, they win because this is bringing interest rates down, which means they get to refinance their debt, which is happening in a few months. So likely what they're going to be able to do is kind of tank the stock market for a bit, which just don't sell and you're going to be fine. Like if you have stocks, just don't sell. You're fine. It was like, oh, it wiped out like $3 trillion or $8 trillion. I forget what the number was. It's like, if it got wiped out that quickly, was it ever really there? Come on, right? Just don't sell. You're going to be fine. They're going to do it for a little bit. They refinance the debt. Then they can turn all of this stuff off. Everything's going to, go right back up. And it'll be, so I think they basically have run that calculation and realized that we kind of can't lose. And I think they're probably right. And everybody's freaking out because everybody thinks short term. And I think in business, in life, if you can think longer term, you're probably going to win. So that's my take. What do you, from a negotiating, you're a far better negotiator than I are. What are you seeing?
Well, the first thing I like is, and I think these are things that we can all use. And the first thing is that how do you bring difficult, entrenched position people to the negotiating table to start with? And I think that this threat, which he then followed through, because he announced it to get the other people to the table. He looked at basically a situation and said, there are several countries that charge significantly higher tariffs than the United States. Most of those countries have a significant trade deficit because they sell much more to the United States than the United States sells there, yet they place tariffs on the United States goods that are coming there, and that just doesn't fundamentally seem fair. And the position of the countries, like let's say China, are basically, you can't make it for as cheap as we can, so we don't really have any reason to change our tariffs. We're selling in there, and your economy can't afford the hit of radical price increases of you reciprocating the tariffs that we've got. And it takes significant resolve to say, you know what? If you can't sell your stuff here anymore, then that's going to be bad for your economy too. So it's not the one-way street that you thought it was. And so I'm going to throw up a giant threat to your economy and the trading partner that we are. Now, that means that you need to have leverage. So if you have no ability to get leverage in the transaction, then that would be difficult. But let's say that you are buying a new car or anything at the store, you're shopping. Let's say that you are a business person and you have suppliers who sell to you who maybe don't give you favorable terms. They don't give you credit, or they don't give you good credit, or they've told you about their price increase. I guess just got a notice of a wine locker rental that's going up 20%. And I'm like, no, that's not acceptable to me. So you have to have some leverage in that there is an existing relationship to take advantage of what we're talking about here. But you do in so many situations of your life. So that's the first thing, is identify that you do have some sort of commercial transaction history or desired interaction that's going to take place, because that's where you get your leverage. Now, you get your leverage by saying something outrageous here, which is kind of Trump style. The outrageous thing is, I'm gonna put in tariffs that have not been put in place in, I think it's 54 years or something like that. What? Well, you're gonna have to get that through Congress. Oh no, I'm not. I unilaterally can make this decision. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But I'm going to do it. And it's going to happen until somebody says it can't. So pain for you. What do you think about that? Now, they're going to be replying, well, but pain for you too. And then you're at the negotiating table. You've taken somebody that said, we will not negotiate on tariffs, or we will not negotiate on price. We won't lower our price. We won't give you credit terms. You're going to have to pay what we say because you want this thing that we have. And you say, yeah, but what if I don't? Right? And now you've got them to the table so you can actually have a conversation. So that to me is the first big takeaway, is throw up the thing that they're afraid of that will be bad for them to get them to the table in the first place. I think that's the very first thing that we do.
I think this is important though, and tell me if you disagree. I think you have to be able to back it up though. You have to say, I'm willing to say this, but I'm also willing to do it. 100%. I think a lot of people try to bluff their way through negotiating, and this is not poker.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I know when we've done business sales and business transactions, and it's, what are we willing to do? Like, are we willing to walk? And if we're willing to walk, then we'll say we're willing to walk. And if we're not, then we're not going to say that we are. And I think all too often people get themselves in trouble in negotiation, and they lose credibility because what they're saying, the big grenade that they're prepared to drop at everybody's feet, they're not actually, either they don't have the grenade or they're not prepared to drop it. And I do think that's important. You've got to have some courage.